listening to the talk, occurred to me this is not the first time that I've addressed the Roman Forum. I was here once before, and I talked about the dangers of private revelations, and there is a tape that was made at that time, and that's available. I'm going to try and address this thing as the best way I can. I said once before, or someone said once before, that Vatican II seemed like a plane wreck. And the plane crashed and everybody's walking around saying, "What happened? What happened?" And the people react in different ways. You know, they say, well, everything has gone to hell, but there's one thing left. I remember a man wrote to me from Alaska, and he said, "Things may be bad, but there's always Bayside." Now you're laughing tonight, but the first time I was here, the people were not laughing. Okay? What I think we saw is the plane crashed. In a sense, I don't think the Pope said specifically there's no state of emergency in the church. But there's been a sense in which there has always been a state of emergency in the church. That's what St. Augustine said to the Donatists. He said to them, he asked them about, well, where do you get the right to break communion? The Donatists were complaining because people offered incense to the emperor or something like that, and the Donatists wanted them rebaptized. Well, that was a crisis. The Donatists were saying that their baptisms weren't valid. There's always going to be a reason for someone to say that there is some sort of state of emergency in the church. And there may very well be, at some point, some serious problem with the church. And like now, I mean, people talk to me, you know, I'm the editor of Fidelity magazine. I mean, strange things in the church are no secret to me. We've done all sorts of articles about all sorts of things, all sorts of bad things in the church. Okay? For 12 years we've been doing this type of stuff. But what I said to the people who call me up, let's say from St. Mary's, Kansas, who are stuck. They say, we're stuck here. I sold my house to move out here, and now I'm stuck in a cult. What do I do? And I said, do you know what you should do? You should jump from the fire back into the frying pan. Because what you did before was jump from the frying pan into the fire, and that didn't work, did it? Because this is exactly what St. Augustine was saying to the people of his age. There is no evil man within the church, or there is no evil movement within the church that is greater than the power of the church to overcome it. And because of that, there is no excuse whatsoever to break communion with the church. If it was true in the days of St. Augustine, it is certainly true today, because the church has survived for 1,600 years of that type of struggle. And there is only one place from which to wage that struggle, the struggle against evil, and that is from within the church, from the deck of the church, from the bark of Peter. There is no other position. So you know what I said to the man from St. Mary's, who now feels he's stuck there and can't get out? I said, after I told him to jump from the frying pan, from the fire back into the frying pan, I said, schism isn't the cure for heresy. and I meant it. It wasn't the cure in the day of St. Augustine. It is not the cure now. You don't solve the problem by leaving the church. When the disgusted leave, only the disgusting are left. That's an old phrase. We come back to the question that I asked. It was the question, to be honest with you, I did not expect such a vociferous answer, but I'm glad I got it because I know where I stand. Is the Pope tainted by communion with Archbishop Weakland? There was a roar coming up out of the audience. This is the same question that St. Augustine asked the Donatists. Are we tainted by communion with evil people? Are evil people enough in the church to deprive us of the grace that comes from that church instituted by Jesus Christ and handed on to Peter? If that's the case, we are in trouble. And if that's the case, the church ceased to exist a long time ago. This was Augustine's argument to the Donatists. If it ceased to exist with St. Cyprian, then there was nothing to be handed on to Archbishop Lefebvre. The plane crashed and we're all walking around. Something bad happened. And we're all walking around, and some people are looking at the sun and the sun is spinning. And some people are holding on to gold rosary beads. And some people are holding on to something they had from the past. Okay? It's understandable. But schism isn't the cure for heresy. Thanks very much.
Well, of course, I agree with almost every word Dr. Jones said there. Under no circumstances should we leave the church. I know Dr. Jones has formally excommunicated me. I think it was in his June issue. I did write to him. I said I got excommunicated before by the Pope at Palma de Troia, but he sent me a beautiful bull. I didn't even get any nice notification, just a little line, Davis is schismatic, which came as a surprise to me. I wish he'd wrote and told my bishop that some years ago, because I've been trying to give up teaching for years. And I work for the diocese. I've worked for the diocese for 30 years. I'm still working from the diocese, actually. I'm getting paid up to the 31st of August. And I go to a diocesan church every Sunday. And when we had the bishop come around to my school quite recently, he annoyed all the women with whom I work. I've had the miserable experience the past 25 years of being the only man in a school full of women. But they're all very upset when the bishop said the first thing I wish to do is to commend the high standard of religious education in Mr. Davis's class, which didn't please them at all. So I'd always been under the impression that I was a Catholic. But anyway, I mean, Dr. Jones knows better than Cardinal Ratzinger, better than Cardinal Lara. If he says I'm in schism, perhaps I better not argue with it. I'd just like to read you the conclusion of a little book I read, which I thought Dr. Jones rather liked this book, but perhaps I'm wrong. It says, it's called I Am With You Always. It was designed to try and stop people leaving the church. It ends like this. However lamentable the state of the church at present, however terrible the trials and tribulations we may have to face, Our Lady of Fatima warned us of them, we must under all circumstances remain in the bark of Peter, which is the one ark of salvation. Pope Leo XIII warned us in Satis Cognitum, the Church of Christ, therefore, is one and the same forever. Those who leave it depart from the will and command of Christ the Lord. Leaving the path of salvation, they enter on the path of perdition. Now, I insist, actually, that I'm a Catholic. I'm in communion with the Pope. I'm in communion with the people subject to him. That means I recognize them as Catholics. I was delighted when our Holy Father in Denver made that wonderful, courageous declaration about abortion. And I'll tell you something, one guess only. I can think of only one religious order in the United States where you can guarantee every single priest in that order agreed with the Holy Father on what he said. You see, Dr. Jones says, are people tainted? Is the Pope tainted by being in communion with weakling? That's totally the wrong question. The Pope is the head of the church. He is the chief shepherd. We are all his flock. Has he got any right to allow someone he knows very well is corrupting the faith of the Catholics in his diocese? And we're talking about children. Has anybody ever here seen that dossier on weakling by Tom Phillips from Milwaukee? What goes on in that diocese is abominable. We're talking about children being corrupted by vile sex education schemes. And it's not just weakling, it was Hunthausen. Has anyone read that book, The Hunthausen File? What Hunthausen was doing, again, is abominable. He's undermining the faith. As I think, wasn't it Nixon, as someone said, the buck stops here. The buck for this stops on the Pope's desk. He did try to do something about Hunthausen. I'm sorry to say, he was publicly humiliated. He sent Bishop Whirl, wasn't it, into the diocese to be an auxiliary bishop. He was supposed to share Hunthausen's powers. The establishment of the modernist American hierarchy ganged up. Whirl was withdrawn and Hunthausen emerged triumphant. He knows about weakling because weakling was going to get an honorary degree at the University of Freiburg. And the Vatican specifically said this man cannot have the degree because of his ambivalent position on abortion. He's got a lot more ambivalent positions than that. But leave that aside. So I'm not talking about, is the Pope tainted? Should the Pope remove weakling from his archdiocese? And if he doesn't do so, is he failing in his duty? I'm not to answer. I'll leave you to decide that yourself. But it's not the first time we haven't had popes who do their duty. You see, it could be much. Pope Paul VI. You see, I'll give you an example here. The papacy, you see, it's a mixture of the human and the divine. And the only guarantee we have is God will never allow a pope to impose upon the church something that is heretical, something that's contrary to faith or morals. He doesn't say the Pope is always going to put out good teaching when it's necessary. He doesn't say the Pope will implement that teaching. We're in the anniversary time of Humanae Vitae. There's a wonderful example. Paul VI stated the intrinsic evil of contraception possibly more firmly than it had ever been stated before. That his teaching was undermined throughout the whole church, particularly in the United States. And what did he do about it? Nothing. And we had the spectacle in my country and your country of bishops and priests from famous Catholic institutions getting up in public, repudiating the teaching of the Pope on a matter of faith and morals. And they stayed in their offices, and they still stay in their offices. You've got this Antonin man is getting up. The Pope has said you can't even discuss women priests. Good. The Society of Pius X agrees with that. Antonin doesn't. No, I've got 2 minutes. Antonin doesn't. I mean, look at this man, Antonin. The Wanderer exposed him on this. He was a seminary rector. He was showing pornographic films in his seminary. Then, lo and behold, what happens to a priest today who shows pornographic films to seminarians? They make him a bishop. People went over to Rome and protested about this. And for some reason, Cardinal Dearden went over and intervened, and Antonin was made a bishop. And now Antonin is making a laughingstock of the church, an issue after issue after issue. And he's such a humble man. Apparently he doesn't want to live in his big palace or whatever you call them over here. He said he wants to go home from house to house and stay with the people in his diocese. I just thought, I hope he doesn't take his home movies with him. But yeah. So perhaps later on when the questions come, I'll say a bit more about this state of emergency. But I'm looking for Father Kenneth Baker said, in the United States, you have a de facto state of schism here. You are in... He says you have a Protestant American church which is separated from Rome. I'll give you a little quote. 1991. With each year, it seems that we get closer to an American church separate from Rome. For millions of Catholics, it already exists in fact, though not yet officially, de facto but not de jure. Even though the intense bureaucracy will not admit it, the church here is in bad shape. There has been a loss of morale and elan. But what should one expect? Listen to this. Is this a state of emergency or not? What should one expect when most Catholic children do not know the basics of the faith? Well, is that true? Yes. It's true. I don't know of a single school in my diocese, now I've retired from teaching, where the children get taught Orthodox Catholic doctrine. It's terrible. We've got an abominable religious course that's being made mandatory in Catholic schools, and they're going to check up that you use it, where they teach them more about Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, than about Catholicism. Right. You agree with that, then? Most Catholic children do not know the basics of the faith, when heresy is openly taught and defended in Catholic universities. I'm not being sarcastic here, I'm being sincere, and there's nobody to thank more for exposing that than Dr. Jones. What sort of church do we live in where the professor of liturgy at Notre Dame University committed suicide and was found to be a homosexual of the most rampant and perverted type, who left in his will a statement saying he did not want to be buried with any form of religious ceremony? That's the church we live in. I'm getting smacked on the arm again. So I'll just read this quickly. So we agree when heresy is openly taught and defended in Catholic universities, when seminarians have declined from 48,000 to about 5,000. That's some renewal for you. When only 14 million out of 55 million Catholics go to church regularly on Sunday. It is not an exaggeration to say that the church here is in a crisis. So Father Baker thinks we're in a crisis. You see, Dr. Jones writes about the crisis admirably. I write about the crisis admirably too, I hope. Lots of people do. What Archbishop Lefebvre did, he did something.